Okay, thank you, everyone. That was a very informative panel. I'm glad we got time to include it. We're nearly there. We're at the last lag. Before we move on to our next session, sorry, guys. Thank you. Sorry. Sorry, thanks. So before we move on to our next session, we're going to have the federations come up. I did just want to follow up quickly on some of the points that were made, and there were just two brief things I'd like to raise that is important for us to consider around the NEVAs. One is, I think for the unionists in the rooms, if you look at the NEVAs and you've now seen that they're sectorally focused, they inform the SGRPs, but they also indicate to you as unionists, and it can be utilized as a tool as to what is actually going to occur possibly within that specific sector, which leads to Section 189s, which leads to loss of membership. So that's why these kinds of toolkits for us, the work that TIPS does is so useful for us as unionists to be utilizing, to be understanding properly, to ask for help from the center, from others, to understand that these changes are occurring within the sectors you organize in. Yeah. The other thing to follow on from Lebo is there is also a question not about only the scopes, about the informal workers that exist and about the scope of your constitution, but there is a looming threat of unions organizing in sectors and the necessity to change your scope yourself. Are you only organizing mine workers, or do you need to expand? Yes, that raises questions about the other unions in those sectors, but we already exist in that world where you've got 5 or 6, well, you've actually got 5 unions in mining, organizing the same workers. But it begs the question as to how we're going to utilize the solidarity that exists in the labor movement between unions, and also that between where we do not, as unions, we are not able to organize informal workers, and a lot of the community-based organizations and NGOs are assisting with that. But the just transition is putting in front of us the necessity to work in solidarity because there are such massive changes coming across sectors. And they're going to impact your actual membership and the ability for your union to organize and the ability for your union to continually survive and serve the membership you have, because it's going to grow smaller. Or it might grow bigger. And these are the kinds of questions that are being posed by all of this research that we've presented today. Quickly moving on, I'd like to please ask Lisa to come up with the representatives from the federations, and we're near the last section of this conference. I do want to just make a formal apology. NACTU is unable to be represented today, as far as I know. We've got COSATU, FEDUSA, and SAFTU. So if the comrades will come up, we've got Khangela, Baloyi, Waheed, Hoosen, and Newton Masuku from on the panel. So comrades can come up to the stage, and then we'll have Lisa facilitate for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you to TIPS and the Labour Centre for asking me to facilitate this serious graveyard session. I can see people are leaving as I am coming onto the stage, but I hope that we won't be too long. I'm talking to the panelists. We won't be too long. Okay, so what this panel is meant to do is really reflect on what you heard today, and give some guidance to the what do you call yourself in short? JTLC, about what should be the research focus and priority in the forthcoming year. So I'm going to ask 3 questions, 2 and then 1. So there'll be 2 rounds. In the first round, I'm going to ask you very briefly, what was the presentation that made the biggest impact on you today? And then a little bit, with a bit more time, you can answer what you think from what you heard today is most useful for the work in your federation. Okay, and then we'll go alphabetically, and then we'll come back again and for you to provide suggestions about what should be the priority research for the that should guide you as unions in responding to the just transition in the forthcoming year, in 2026. Okay. And then if there's time, because there's only half an hour, so we was finished at 16:15, anybody from the floor can also contribute and say, we would like also this focus or that focus of the research. Okay, so I'm going to start with, I understand I must do alphabetically. So we'll start with COSATU.
Sitting up.
I can see that as well. Go ahead.
Afternoon, everyone. And Amandla.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, no, the first question that I need to answer or am expected to answer is which presentation I think touched me most today. I will say almost all the presentations have touched me most. However, the first presentation, which is the annual report on South Africa and climate change, maybe it's because it's one of those presentations that I knew, and it is actually talking to the impact on communities and workers, because the presenter said. Climate change is the crisis that is accelerating. And when it is accelerating, it means that we are accelerating the impact of climate change, especially to poor communities. Because rich communities are able to mitigate the impact of climate change. And the presenter further said, justice should always be at the core of the just energy transition. So when we are transitioning from high carbon emitters to greener energy, we need to make sure that there must be justice. But the question might be, what is that justice?
So now the question is, what do you think has been the impact of the research that has been done so far, when you listen to the research that we heard today?
Yeah, no, the research is actually pointing us to a direction where we need to understand the impact of the climate change.
Okay.
I also noticed that the researcher made recommendations on what is it that must be done. Because the research further said when these things are happening, there is no proper consultation, especially to the most impacted people. So if there is proper consultation, maybe the people that are impacted might be able to come with suggestions that are going to assist them. The researcher said there must be a transfer of workers and communities. And also there must be there must be a social protection for both formal and informal workers.
Okay.
So the presenter also said there is a problem when it comes to consultation, because you find there are people that are well organized that come as if they are representatives of workers. But you find that they are actually not taking the mandate from anyone.
Okay.
And those that are actually representing workers don't have resources to actually attend to these meetings. Sometimes these meetings are in virtual platforms, and you find that they don't have the data to actually connect to that.
Okay. Are you fine?
Yeah, no.
I think you've highlighted importantly that this issue of uneven power relations and the role that research can play to assist unions address that. Let me now go to FEDUSA. Briefly, what was the presentation that you made biggest impact on you? And then what did you think is the usefulness of the research that was presented today?
Right, I'm Waheed, I'm from FEDUSA, as mentioned before. Right, so the question was, which presentation made the biggest impact on me today? Right, I think all presentations actually gave us different dimensions on the issue of what is the just transition. But the session, I think this last session appealed to me the most. You know, in the trade union movement, we are realizing now that climate change is a far broader and bigger issue when it comes to worker issues. I think previously when we looked at climate change and we looked at the discussions around climate change and the issue of the impact on workers, we didn't look at it in the scale that we're looking at it now with the research that's been done. And we realized the consequences that are going to be impacted on workers. So just transition is not just about changing jobs. It has far bigger social, economic responsibilities and impacts. So social dialogue at NEDLAC needs to take a bigger role than it's currently taking place. We got the Climate Act, but I think regulations are going to be very important, especially regulations with regard to the work streams that need to come out from there, and especially on the impacted industries and sectors. As much as maybe from our perspective, some of our affiliates are in the mainstream impacted sectors like coal, mining, energy, etc. But you know, with many unions in the public sector, for example, we may feel that we are far from the core of the fire, but certainly we're going to be impacted on. And that's why I made the comment that government is not taking the leading role that we want, and we want to see. And certainly from the public sector, and I know that yes, probably the mining sector is the biggest in the country, but the biggest single employer in the country is the public sector. And we're not seeing the drive towards a just transition in terms of its infrastructure. And we know that many of the public sector facilities, they've got ailing infrastructure. And if we want to get that, we want to fix that, we'd rather fix it while we're transitioning at the same time. So we need campaigns, yes. And that's our job as unions, is to campaign around the issue of climate change. I think it's also an awareness. When we did a research study on asking workers on the ground floor, on the coal, at the coal face, what is climate change and what it's all about? Very few of them really knew what it was about. For the person at the bottom of the pyramid, they don't really understand the issue of climate change and the impact it's having on our lives, and the issue of green jobs and moving to a green economy. So definitely the demand for social protections, I think, is a big issue for unions and for us as labor, because we don't want just social protection. We want social protection guarantees. We want guarantees for those social, especially we know that income support, retraining and reskilling. We spoke about that. The HRTC has just got off the starting block now, and then pension protections is the other one, because we know that the public sector and many employees are moving towards reducing the retirement age because of a number of factors, and climate change is one of them, but they wouldn't say it. So collaboration between government, employers, and training authorities needs to happen. That's something that we feel there's a great gap in. To achieve the NDPs, there needs to be that collaboration between government, employers, and the training authorities. And we've seen it, the training authorities, there's been a number of problems, and there's no real training that's worked towards the climate change agenda. And we also spoke, I think, about gender equality and youth and the vulnerable groups. I think that came out quite strongly from that last group. And like I said, work education. And then I know, yes, one of the key things that I picked up is the drive towards public ownership of our energy sector and democratization of that governance of that sector. And I think it's a big problem. We're going to have to work very hard as the four domains of society, which is civil society, labor, business, and government, to try and create a sector or the create the environment where we can still maintain this at public sector level, government owned, because we know the impact if these are outsourced to private sector. And I know, yes, the drive is to, in many instances, to get the IPs privately owned, yeah. But we don't believe that the vulnerable group and the low income, employees are going to benefit from that. And we know, yes, the key sector is the energy sector. And I'm going to wind down.
Like you already got answering.
I'm going to wind down now. We know that the energy sector is the main sector that's been looked at for the jet and but that impacts on other sectors like the water and other vulnerable sectors. So it's definitely I think the debate has got to be also around energy security versus energy sovereignty, because yes, we may get funding for transitioning, but whoever's going to give us that funding is going to want to control that funding, and we realize that maybe we need to look at ourselves in-house in order to drive the energy, drive the just transition agenda within our country. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. It looks like you also answered the next question. So what I'm hearing is maybe there needs to be a lever in the public sector, which is an interesting thing to think about. And I think you're also supporting the idea, I think it came from one of the presentations, that maybe there must be a survey of worker attitudes. And then you've also emphasized the need for social protection, more work on social protection. Let me go to SAFTU. You've got the questions.
Can you repeat this?
What was the session that made the biggest impact on you? And then what did you think is the usefulness of what was presented today for your unions? And then with the second round is, where do you think the priority should be for the next year? So hold your thoughts about that for the second round. Okay.
Yeah, well, for me, it is the connecting thread of the presentations themselves. And the connecting thread for me is that the vulnerabilities are cut across class lines. In other words, it is the working class that is incurring the full burden of not only climate change, but the already ongoing unjust transition. And that's what I picked up.
Okay.
And this is demonstrated again by the nature of the so-called consultations. The fact that communities and workers are not properly consulted rather, is not a mistake, it's not technical glitches, but it's deliberate and conscious. It is underpinned by the understanding that society can only progress if it is led by the private sector or by the market. I don't like this word market, by the way. It gives it makes it a natural phenomenon. It's like the law of gravity or the laws of thermodynamics. The market simply means a small group of tiny elite of capital owners. And when you say the market, it appears as if it's something we must just bow down to. There's nothing to. But the point is that the lack of proper consultation is underpinned by precisely that. Even when they consult, they are just ticking boxes. We consulted and then proceed. And therefore, the question of class therefore underpins this whole, ought to underpin this whole discussion. And you see it even with the independent power producers. Daily we are told that the state does not have money to undertake infrastructure, including even to champion the just transition itself. They're saying you must crowd in the private sector. That's the lingo of the technocrats now. You must crowd in the private sector. But the independent power producers themselves are underwritten by the state. The state takes the risk of the investment. It sits on the balance sheet of the treasury. The very same state we are told does not have money underpins the independent power producers. So this is ideological. The question is, the notion is that society, again, as I've said, ought to advance for as long as, can only advance if it is led by the market, namely, i.e., a small elite group of capital owners. So the point about, of course, can you repeat it? The second part of the question.
No, I'm coming around the second part.
No, there was a second part before
yeah, but you've okay. What I heard you say
yes.
is that the thread that made the most impact for you was around the issue of class.
Yes.
And how the working class, and I would imagine more broadly, including the vulnerable communities, are the most affected.
Yes.
And then the second part of that was the question was, from the research that you heard, how do you what was the most impactful, you know, that you could use also going forward?
Okay.
And
I've dealt with it.
yeah, I think you've dealt with it, yeah, which is about the role of the market and the problematic role of the market. Okay, let's come back to COSATU. Going forward, in 2026, the Jtlc, am I right, has got a research program. We already know that they're going to move from the NEVAs to the sector job resilience plans. What else would you like them to focus on in the next year?
Yeah, no, maybe we need to focus on what was missing on this year's seminar.
Mm-hmm.
I think what is missing is that this is not a problem for only South Africa. It's an international problem. It's a global problem which needs a global solution, because it does not matter how much we try to reduce in South Africa. If other countries are not doing anything, it's as good as we're doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That's why in the COSATU blueprint on climate change, COSATU talks about a fair global deal. Maybe we need to start asking those questions.
Okay.
That if Africa is contributing only 4% of the total emission of the world, for Africa to be burdened by unreasonable NDCs, while other countries are not actually even committing themselves. And also the type of solution that is imposed to us, that this is what you must do. These are the technologies that we must look at. We need not confine ourselves to only wind and solar coming from the private sector. We need to make sure that the public sector also participate in wind and solar. And also we need to look at other technologies that might assist in the reduction of emissions. Because if you look at the Germany experience or experiment, it failed. I was checking today, out of 71.2 gigawatts of installed capacity of wind in Germany, they have only 3.32. I don't think we can afford as a country to have a technology that will have an infrastructure there, but it does not give us at least 50% of the installed capacity. Wind, at least, solar, at least is giving 26% today in Germany. Germany has got 160 gigawatts of installed capacity of both solar and wind. But it is getting most of its electricity from neighboring countries. And if we look at our situation, we can't afford to have that situation, because we don't have neighbors that have electricity that we are importing, except that we are getting 1,000 megawatts from Mozambique.
Okay.
So I think we need to look at that
yeah.
more of, and that maybe the last thing that I must say is we must redefine the problem as well,
Okay.
because I did not hear any presentation that is defining a problem. Because if we don't know what exactly the problem is, we might come out with a wrong or correct solution for a wrong problem.
Okay.
Which will be a wrong solution.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you, I think 4 things. The one is an international focus.
Yeah.
Secondly, on looking at different technology solutions. Thirdly, the ownership issues. And fourthly, tightening up how we define the problem. Thank you. Waheed, you already had some ideas.
Ideas, yeah.
So now you're having a second bite.
Now, I'm just going to add on to what I've said earlier.
Mm.
I think the other things that maybe one would consider is maybe the ILO level and the global unions, global trade union perspective. We need to, I think it's important we find out what they're doing as well. Because remember, the global north is also working on programs and research. I think we need to, because they're also transitioning and their impact is on our impact on us. So we just need to see what they're doing as well. And also with the CBAM, I think we're working towards a program, but we need to find out exactly where we are and where we would like to be, because certainly the emissions taxes are going to impact on us if we continue to move on the road that the trajectory that we are, if we don't transition by the deadlines that we've set ourselves. So even though, the TFFE and ECC are not really, I think that's something that we need to also sort out in time. We need to cross the bridge where we work together. The PCC really needs, I know I said it already, but it needs to be given more autonomy to do its work. And it needs to really drive the agenda of climate change and the just transition programs. So, and also maybe going forward in what I'd like to see as well is the principles that relate to the issues of achieving both environmental sustainability together with decent jobs need to talk to each other.
Okay.
Because we know, yes, climate change is an issue, it's a big issue, and we need to save the planet, but we need to do it against a balancing act, which is decent jobs. The two cannot go against each other. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. Let's go to SAFTU.
Yeah, I mean, two areas. The first one is that as we are conceptualizing, as the labor movement, we are conceptualizing the just transition and all of that. The government is engaged in a parallel process of instituting its own policies. For instance, the Operation Vulindlela itself, which, as we read it, it tells you that it wants to make water, logistics, electricity, bankable. In other words, the working class is to be presented as a captive market to the bankers. In fact, it reminded me of, just as an aside, 2015, 2016, in the Fees Must Fall movement. The students take to the street, they demand free education, and a commission is assembled. It was called the Hair Commission. And one of the most potent policy proposals of the Hair Commission was that they must introduce what they call the loan contingency guarantee scheme, that all students in both public and private institutions are to be allowed to take loans from the banks. And if they default, the state will carry that risk. So the students were to be presented as a captive market to the bankers. The bankers, of course, would have been a banker's paradise, because that debt, since it is underwritten by the state, it means it has no risk of default. When they go and sell it in the financial markets, it makes them profit. That is what Operation Vulindlela intends to do with the private sector. Now, the question, therefore, a research interest for me is how aligned is what we are calling for here with what the government is busy with. It's busy with. They were unleashing gain, which is the way in which the Vulindlela will be operationalized. So we have to look at that. The second one is the question of I'm skeptical about, perhaps I may ruffle feathers. I'm skeptical about the reskilling and upskilling. Very skeptical about this. Because there's a phenomenon even before the question of climate change and and transitions was at the center. There's always been a phenomenon since the 70s at least of technological unemployment. Of course, the radical left, the economists were saying there is such a thing as technological unemployment. Of course, it goes all the way back to Marx. There is such a thing as technological unemployment. The mainstream were saying there's no such a thing. They called it the Luddite fallacy. Some called it the lump of labor fallacy, because the argument was that as technology is introduced here, the market will simply reallocate that labor to new industries that are emerging. But just recently, I think it was last year, if not year before last, the Billionaires Club World Economic Forum admitted actually that technological unemployment is the real thing. They are beginning to be concerned about it. So I'm saying one of our solutions is to reskill and upskill. But that assumes that whatever it is you are reskilling the workers and upskilling to them can be taken by robotics, mechanization, AI, and so on and so forth. So I'm saying it's a research area that I think it should be taken up. To what extent is labor still relevant as a force in society? And if it is not, what implications does that have for the capitalist system as a mode of production? Because it depends on the market. The market presupposes a consumer backed by a purchasing power, which means wage for labor income. I mean, labor for wage income. So I think that has to be looked at so that we do not call for things that are technically impracticable. Thanks.
Okay, I think that is a very thought-provoking thing to look at, but not unimportant. So if I listen to if I'm going to summarize now from FEDUSA and SAFTU, again, I think a theme about how you can support global trade union solidarity are here coming up. More work on CPAM, to look at alignment around the NDC, maybe a bit more. And then it's come up a few times, not, about, you've put it as PCC autonomy, but it seems to me about how the trade union movement can become more effective in the tripartite or multipartite institutions in which you are members of, or what you want the state to do, so that you can not just be consulted, but that you, as people said this morning, there can be more effective co-decision making. That's what I'm hearing from you, Waheed. And then obviously the balance between balancing jobs and environmental and climate change concerns. I think from yourself that, what I'm hearing, and it's an important area, is that in the government now they talk about trading services. Water, electricity, sanitation, and pick it up is a trading service. What does a trading service means? It is bankable. It can be in the market. And I think what you're saying is that there needs to be consideration about, with due regard to issues of the just transition, how we make sure that those services are not tradable. And then your last point, I don't really know how to summarize it, but it has been raised a number of times, including by Lebo, about what is the changing nature of the labor market? What does AI mean for trade union organization? What is the form of these so-called decent jobs in renewable energies? What do you do about informal, so-called informal labor? So I think there is a set of issues there that could be meaningfully looked at. Matthew, I hope I've done my job well. And by the way, it is 16:15. Thank you very much to the panel.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, comrades, for that. We are nearing the end. I think what I'd like to do is the following, is just take a moment for anyone that would like to just make, I'm going to take 3 hands for any additions, just brief comments, and can assist us as the JTLC. And then we're going to move to make some closing remarks. So I've got 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yeah, there's some mics up here. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Matthew. My name is Shane Troshana. I was not here in the morning, but I could see that we're talking about like the value chains and then just transition, because it looks like we are really so much socialized to connect the just transition only to coal. And I think we need to give at this conference an assignment, because the research assignment, to go and look at the number of jobs that can, for example, be created with lithium-ion batteries of the minerals that we produce, because everything time we talk about these things, more especially with organizations from the global north, it looks like the only thing that they can contribute to us is look at the issues of human rights, due diligence, and all stuff, but not the technical know-how of how these minerals can actually create jobs. And sometimes then we find it extremely difficult to put even a coherent argument, for example, about the 200 years as that we still have with coal, which we can actually use to bargain that these companies need to produce here. Because we are so divorced from our minerals that we don't know what they are used for, which is problematic. And we're talking about critical minerals, but we don't necessarily want to know what they are used for. And that is actually problematic. And we need to understand each and every mineral that is categorized as such, more especially by the European Union, as to what they are used for, chrome and all stuff. What is it that is used for, so that whatever that is used for, it must be manufactured here. I mean, we have an existing OEGM, the auto sector, which we definitely have to convert into producing electric cars. But we are now starting to get more and more Chinese cars that are not produced here, because China has the workforce, and those companies can actually produce the cars here. And we need to come up with comprehensive policy directives that will definitely help us manufacture jobs linked to mineral. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Ipeling here. You had Michael.
Good afternoon. My name is Martin Kagwa. I come from the National Union of Mining Workers Research Institute. 2 comments. I think the presentation and the debate about just transition is full of contradictions, some of which we are not or we should acknowledge. The term I want to say, to use that comes to mind, about things that are mutually exclusive. There was a presentation, for example, which said that we can manage border carbon tax, but at the same time, we need also to make sure that there is serious social safeguards. There is no way you can have these social safeguards when the government has no money, when you are constraining the industrial policy. So we should be very careful when we make a recommendation to make sure that what we are recommending is mutually inclusive, that these things can happen together. The second point I would like to say relates to the issue of making or trying to convince trade unions to lose real jobs while promising them hypothetical jobs. That's what we see in the call section. The jobs that are going to be lost, we have numbers. We know what happened at Pomat. But you are saying, oh, there could be some green jobs somewhere. We say, okay, where? Give us an example. How are they going to happen? Say they will happen. So you want, that cannot be justice. You can't be trying to reach a just energy transition through a process which is unjust, because whoever you're going to steal his job and promising him an hypothetical job, you'll have done an injustice to that person. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Him. Sorry, I didn't see you, Hamida. Sorry.
Otherwise, I was going to complain that you're giving it to all 3 men.
That is legitimate, yes.
All right, so I've just got, in terms of what you need to do, I'd like to respond to that question, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a discussion currently around the just transition being a mechanism to do digitization, militarization, and privatization. I think it would be important because the current discussion is very myopic. You're only looking at South Africa. I mean, the whole war in Palestine, the issue of Sudan, the global politics of what's happening in relation to global roots, China, America, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we cannot misunderstand what's happening in South Africa without understanding the global context. So I think that would be one important point. Secondly, if you're interested in participatory action research as a process, then I would suggest we do it the other way around, that all researchers here sit down and we as Labour will tell you our experiences. And you can use that as a participatory action research process. I think that would be really, really valuable because there's a lot that we have to contribute. Thirdly, in relation to the CBAM and also the issues of the just transition, I think it would be important for the Labour Centre to look at what is our industrial strategy. Because trying to keep plugging into what externally is being done around carbon and carbon markets and CBAM without actually developing an industrial strategy for ourselves that might have nothing to do with carbon, that might be talking about regional integration, that might be, developing new niche markets, et cetera, and taking the point around value chains, et cetera. I think let's first start there and then look at how carbon fits into the picture. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I do apologize. We do have to move on and head to closure. We do have a number of things to follow on after, but thank you very much for the federations that gave some guidance for us as the JTLC. And we've noted all of the issues raised and those from the floor now. I do want to highlight just a few things before I move to closure. We're very grateful to be part of the TIPS family, or organization rather. There's a lot of work that TIPS itself is actually conducting that meets a lot of the concerns raised today. One of them is batteries, for example. Part of our job as the JTLC is also to collate some of that work and a number of other projects, information and research work that's done all over, including regionally, continentally, and globally, to provide that information to the trade union movement here and the workers' movement in general. So that's what we endeavor to do. And we've only existed for a year, but this policy conference has definitely given us a kind of compass as where we need to be focusing our efforts. So we will be moving forward with that. So I do appreciate that. When Newton was up here speaking about Banker's Paradise, I had Coolio in my head for some reason, but that's fine. I do want to also re-emphasize that there's just one thing that we need to remember, and it's nice to have the unions in the room. We also have a number of community-based organizations. We have a number of labor service organizations and other NGOs. There's solidarity in a way being forced on us, which isn't a bad thing. But we do need to be specifically looking outwards as the labor movement in general to the fact that there are things happening in the region, continentally and globally. Other unions are facing the same questions and challenges we are. We need to be joining hands to figure out what have they done in their context. Can it be applied to ours? Can we be relying on them? And I made this point at the Global South Exchange. There's a way that organized labor here in this country can be putting pressure and asking for solidarity for those unions in the Global North, because there is a lot of pressure being put on us from the Global North as the Global South to be making ourselves available for funding, but also to be making ourselves available to transition, yet we also need to industrialize and such and such. There's a way that we can be joining hands across the hemisphere to actually ask those unions themselves in their context to be providing pressure onto their governments, right? So we need to be looking at a variety of those solutions. So that's just what occurred to me now, but I would like to move us to our closure. So before we actually deal with those who have asked to have closure for us, I would like to just mention a few other housekeeping notes. On your way out, there is some tea that is there, so please grab as you will. Please remember that at where you registered, there are some parking tickets you can pick up for validation if you haven't got. And if you haven't yet, please do physically sign the register that we have, so we do need to know. And then, give me 1 second. I'll make my note of thanks after, but I would like to actually hand over to Saliem Fakir online. And then we're going to ask Slim to make a few words, and then we'll move to closure formally. So can we just check online if Saliem is actually here? Yeah, there he is. I see him. Hi.
Thanks, Matt. And you want me to kick off?
Go for it.
Thank you. Let me first congratulate the Just Transition Labour Centre and tips for your inaugural conference, because I know it has taken perhaps maybe 2 years now to get to where you are, and just the impressive way in which you've brought diverse institutions and people to participate in this conference. But I thought I shouldn't end my speech without raising something that came across my desk today, which is remarks from President Lula, and it just shows us the interesting time and the difficult or the interesting challenges we may have globally in the way in which we think about just transition or energy transitions. And as people may know, Brazil has just discovered new oil reserves just off the Amazon basin. And Lula was asked about the hosting the COP conference, which is the climate conference in Belém in the next few days. What about this issue of oil? Because you presented yourself as the champion of climate issues. Brazil has positioned itself in that way. And Lula said, as long as the world needs it, meaning oil, Brazil is not going to throw away wealth which could improve the lives of Brazilian people. Now, there's an echo of that also within the philanthropy space with what Bill Gates said, that there needs to be a pivot towards poverty. I think the issue that all of us are having to deal with is that, particularly on the African continent where the African Climate Foundation works, is the need to hold two things together, which is the development aspirations of the continent and to bridge or to bring a sensible and managed approach to how we deal with climate issues in general, both from improving Africa's own emissions profile, which is, by the way, very low, except for South Africa and a few other countries, and dealing with climate risk, which actually climate risk cannot be solved by a single country, but is a global action that's required. And this is all happening in a world that there are parallel things happening. One is the fight for energy security, and the other is to engage in energy transitions in order to bring down global emissions. So I just wanted to put that context of the work that is cut out for us. And I also want to say that the Labour Centre is filling a big gap in South Africa, particularly in the just transition. The concept of the just transition, as many would know, is actually comes from the labor unions, if you just go into the history of it. It was a concern of the African Climate Foundation and a number of funders that actually are supporting the Just Transition Labour Centre, is that there needs to be an increased participation of labor unions, labor members, and people who are interested in are concerned about labor issues, and that without a strong thought leadership from the labor fraternity or constituency, the work on just transition in South Africa will be very impoverished. And secondly, I think there's a very important practical role of ensuring that the rights and opportunities for workers and communities are protected at the same time. So it's not just about intellectual leadership, but on the ground emphasis on protecting rights of workers and communities in the transition areas, if I may call it that. Just two more remarks. And this, I think I want to put this on the table because you have asked people to put down issues around future research, is the role of the South Africa Just Transition Labour Centre is being admired. There's very deep interest in this on the rest of the African continent, and also other regions, South regions like in Brazil, Indonesia, Vietnam and other places which we engage in as well on the global scale, as to how to make these labor centers work and to produce the kind of work that is necessary to shape the negotiations of labor of workers around the transition. So I would encourage you to also look at Matt and your team on South-South cooperation, and particularly ways in which we can share experiences and how to organize labor across the continent in a Pan-African way. Lastly, I would say it is really wonderful for me to see, because I've been involved in discussions with yourself, Saul, and many other people, to see how fast the Labour Centre has grown, and just the quality of the papers and the young researchers that are working on these issues. So I want to thank you, Matt, and your team, and also other co-funders for giving life to something that I think has huge potential and is very, very important for it to succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Saliem. I'd like to call up Slim from, let me try and see. I don't know if I should try and pronounce this. Agence Française de Développement. That's the way. That's the way. Please, Slim. Come up. You can come up here. It's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks, Matthew. So as we conclude this conference, I would like to thank all participants, partners, and stakeholders for all the very interesting contributions, discussions, and I'm sure that, you know, through the dialogue we've heard today, the roundtable, the research that we've also saw today, definitely I'm sure that, you know, this discussion, you know, definitely we're able to deepen our understanding about the opportunities and also these challenges with regard the energy transition in South Africa, and particularly the impact on the working class communities. And as IFD, we are more than happy, and I may say we are proud to contribute, to be part of, you know, this amazing work that you are doing in the Labour Centre. So definitely we are definitely convinced that we need to support, you know, the work you are doing in the Just Transition Labour Centre. Why? Because definitely providing research and knowledge could help shape relevant public policy to, if I may say, could maximize the social outcome of the energy transition. So I think that's a very important point that needs to be highlighted. And to conclude, I would like to say that again, thank you. And so we are looking forward to continue our collaboration and discussion. And I cannot wait to discover the final, you know, papers because I'm so excited to the work you have busy with. So thanks a lot, Matthew, and thanks a lot all the trade unions and the partners. So more than happy to be part and to be on board also. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Just a special mention to the our funders as well from ACF, AFD, and Climate Works Foundation. Thank you very much for supporting our work. This is our inaugural annual policy conference. It's a mouthful, but next year we'll be doing our next policy conference at the end of the year. We'll be doing more research work and working to engage with our partners, including the federations and everyone else. And I do specifically also want to thank the federations for their participation. Excuse me. Also the community-based organizations, the NGOs, the online community that was also part of the conference, our industry role players and government participants. And lastly, a special mention for the TIPS admin staff for the brilliant work to help us put together this conference. You guys ran around and did a lot of work. So thank you very much on behalf of the Just Transition Labour Centre. And lastly, to remind you, we will be circulating all the presentations. And we will also, once they are ready, circulate the final reports with the research we've been conducted. But thank you very much, and safe travels, and beware of the climate change outside. Thank you. Thank you.